the center, and I'm going to be quickly introducing the ever-popular Camilla. It's great to see such a good turnout. Faculty, students, staff, and visitors, too. We have a couple of people visiting from off campus. A few quick details. At the end of the session, we greatly appreciate your filling in the brief survey. It will help us with future series. Also, if you hands up if you don't have a TRU media consent form. Ron, are you interested in being taped? I'd also like to do a quick promo for the next session next Friday at this time in this place. It's also a sociology session presenting our Dr. Dawn Farrow and her students Shalyn Pigeon and Justin Potestio, and one of the actors in the homeless play that those three were involved in, that actor being Tammy Kaza. So if you want more information, pick that up on your way out, please. There is also a list of all of the remaining presentations for the semester that you can pick up on your way out. Okay, I think that's it for the details. It's so wonderful to see, I guess we have more confirmation of how popular Camilla is with large numbers here, and particularly the student fan club. Camilla is an assistant professor of sociology here at TRU, and she's a wonderful researcher. I've seen her already engaging her students as research assistants in her research. And today she's going to talk about an experiential learning opportunity within her classroom in the form of digital media. So please join me in welcoming Camilla.
Thanks, Jenny. Well, thank you so much for coming. It's really great to have a wonderful group to talk to, and I hope that what I'm going to talk about will just get you to think about some ideas so that we can have some really great discussion after about just the idea of public scholarship and the idea of public criminology within the classroom. And so what I want to talk about, as Jenny said, is just how I've been thinking about my own teaching, how I've been thinking about kind of pedagogical practice, and about engaging my students and creating engaged learners about crime, about the criminal justice system. And although this has been a project of mine just as a teacher for many years, I think it's really come to the forefront of my mind since I've been doing my current research project. And so my current research project is one that's funded by TRU, the Internal Research Fund, and is on perceptions of crime and crime causation. And I think that project, the engagement with people about their use of media, their consumption, and how that shapes their imagination about crime and criminal justice system, makes it even more relevant to think about how we can promote notions of public scholarship. So I think the first thing to do is to show a clip to get you to contemplate the cultural landscape, okay? So, what a show that is not. Let's go. So, season 1 of CSI, very first. Oh no, thank you.
The case is hot. There's a lot of heat in the sheriff's office. And the crime scene is the key to the killing.
How do you talk to a dead body? I let him talk to me, actually. In fact, he just spoke.
From producer Jerry Bruckheimer of Armageddon and Con Air comes the gritty new primetime series on CBS, CSI.
We solve crimes most labs render unsolvable.
Crime scene investigation.
I know that everybody's tired, but this is the time where we have to work together.
A team of forensic experts.
2 sharp women are better than one.
Something hard with a diamond insignia on the back. You find that, I bet you find your killer.
Bring crimes back to life.
This guy fell to his death wearing prescription eyeglasses. Jumpers take their glasses off. I didn't push him off. You can tell all that just by looking at a pair of eyeglasses. You have no idea.
In the city of Las Vegas.
Police officers, open up!
Between the high rollers and the low lifes.
The evidence leads us to believe that it was in fact a homicide.
Then he was murdered.
Between the hidden clues.
I know this Chuck is guilty.
And the buried motives.
Concentrate on what cannot lie. The evidence.
Lies the trail. to the truth.
I think we may have our suicide note.
I just can't do it anymore.
This is his picture, but that's not my son's voice.
William Peterson, Mark Helgenberger, Gary Dorton, George Eads, Georgia Fox, Paul Guilfoyle.
All that stuff you rattled off, how'd you know about all that?
Your boyfriend told me.
CSI.
So a nice way to kind of start a way of thinking about the visibility of crime in the criminal justice system, right? And this is season 1, a number of years ago now, right? At the kind of beginning of that kind of push for, the representation of crime in the criminal justice system, the representation of forensics. And I wanted to use it as just a way to promote your thinking about that landscape, right? This landscape of representations of crime, and to really fuel what we're aware of, right? That the saturation of images of crime of the criminal justice system, and the consequences of that saturation, right? That knowledge is very much promoted and created through these images. That the media is that influential source of constructing ideas about the realities of crime and the efficiencies of the system. And so we want to kind of think about that, think about television, think about film, but also now even more so thinking about social media, right? Thinking about how those also contribute to these very well circulated images of the system. And Surratt talks about how people use knowledge they obtain from the media to construct a picture of the world, an image of reality on which they base their reactions. And it's interesting to kind of look at the research that we've seen about the media, that there's a lot out there, right? There's a lot out there contemplating the role of the media and shaping perceptions. When you start to kind of deconstruct what are those images, what are the types of crimes that we see, we know that the media loves to sensationalize crime, that we see continued reports on the lurid cases of murder and rape, and that the general public is influenced by these stories, becoming fearful, altering their behavior to avoid victimization. And these news accounts proclaiming crime waves are often driven by the need to sell newspapers, to increase viewership, right? The corporate imperative. But these media accounts can be biased, right? They can be inaccurate and create myths or fractured realities about what is actually happening. And again, Surratt says that television entertainment largely ignores most aspects of real crime. He focuses on the US, focusing instead on the most serious, violent, and life-threatening offenses. And by sensationalizing crime, TV misses the opportunity to educate the audience about the true dimensions of America's crime problem. And as I said, in this growing digital era, this is even more so, I think, is thinking about that information is now even more readily and rapidly available. That often sensational headlines are quickly distributed through Facebook, through Twitter. And these new forms of media have developed, so have the avenues to distribute inaccurate portrayals of crime and criminals. And in such a way, the prevalence of what Chancellor McLaughlin called crime talk can lead to public misinformation about crime and subsequently reproduced stereotypes about who is or who is not the typical offender, and provide simplistic understandings to crime causation. So why does crime actually happen? And along with serving to construct this flawed sense of reality, these perceptions shape how individuals think about the criminal justice system, its goals, its policies, and its outcomes. And I just wanted to show you this because all of this provides that context for thinking about the need to really engage with criminology as a discipline. And so here, just the idea of that connection between representation and policy, highlights that process of social construction. Right? The idea of these crime and justice narratives, the focusing on symbolic crimes, these sensational crimes, and the media disseminated crime information. that those that are the most media savvy, the most successful, become those that are favored, which then structure social attitudes, perceptions, and behaviors. That what we agree to believe about crime and justice, such as the faulty system, frame and predator criminals are representative of criminality. And so that leads to a particular way of thinking about criminal justice, right? That if you're surrounded with images of the system is inefficient, we're surrounded by predator criminals, well, the only way to think about how we should control crime is crime control. Right, that we have to increase police, focus on prisons, and be tough on crime, and alternatives to that kind of go by the wayside. And further, it's about the individual as well. Our ideas about the system, but also about your sense of self. That a constant promotion of these types of images feed that discourse of fear that David Al-Tidy, for example, speaks very well and provides some really interesting analysis on it. That he says the only response we seem to have is to wait and to prepare, get armed, lock doors, build walls, and avoid strangers in public places. This may be a good formula for the cinema thrillers, but it's lousy for everyday life. And so this kind of fear and fatalistic acceptance of crime, this mystification of the criminal justice system, and this myopic support for punitive criminal justice policies, and the discouragement of other proposed approaches. And I wanted to show you, in the spirit of engaging with the media, right, to show you a current event that gets us to contemplate that. Just recent in terms of something in BC, Surrey first unveils crime-fighting platform calling for more RCMP. And I think once you start to contemplate that frame of these images, this way of thinking, it provides us a way of looking at and thinking about these current events, these current approaches to the system, to policy. And I found this article to be particularly interesting because it says that our crime numbers have gone down since 2008, but that isn't the message that is being perpetuated either by residents or by the media. And so because of that, there's the introduction of this crime-fighting agenda. And so it's even openly acknowledging that crime rates are going down, and yet that cultural landscape, the cultural understanding or social understanding is that we should continue to be fearful. And so it supports that policy agenda, right? And further it says from the political candidate, I think it's important that not only is Surrey a safe city, but everyone feels like we are a safe city. Whether it's reality or perception, crime is at the top of everyone's mind, and there isn't any politician running who doesn't want to see Surrey as a safe city. And so think about the language there, about perceptions, about safety, and how that's translating into action, into policy. And so this gets us to think about then, how do we then engage with all of this? How do we think about that, the gaps between perception and reality, engage with public understandings of crime in the criminal justice system? Well, in response to these discussions, in response to public misunderstandings, scholars have begun to assess the need to develop public criminology and incorporate the advantages of digital media. And although not a new idea, it's grounded in the history of public scholarship in the 60s, the 70s, there is now this greater attention being given to this very popular concept of public criminology. And so building on this notion of public scholarship that was popularized in academic discourse by the American Sociological Association meeting in 2005 by people like Michael Burroway. So with this attention, scholars have argued that criminology has lost the knack of engaging with public debate. And as a result, criminological findings have had a relatively small impact on public's perceptions and understandings. And so consequently, the public's limited understanding of criminological research has resulted in favoring at times these ineffective criminal justice policies. So this growing push to adopt methods of public scholarship in order to engage the general public. And these conditions have produced what Loder and Sparks say, this heating up of the climate surrounding discourse and action around crime. That criminology now operates in what they call this hot climate. And public criminology from this perspective is not a debate about whether criminologists should try to engage a broader non-academic discourse, but whether and how criminological knowledge can make more effective and intelligible contributions to the public sphere given this hot climate in which it's operating. And so Uggen and Inderbitzen, they assert that this can be achieved by conducting research and dialogue with communities through disseminating knowledge about crime and punishment. And these efforts can help shift public discourses around crime and justice away from these simplistic understandings. And so they are really good examples about how we can adapt to and take advantage of widespread connectivity in digital media. They talk about the use of easily accessible media such as blogs, Facebook, and how they can be used to promote this discussion, promote this understanding. And also kind of get us to think about how we can change the way that we do disseminate knowledge. You know, using digital media, using open access forums to talk about these topics. So I'll just show you a couple of examples. That this is Uggen and Inderbitsen's blog, Public Criminology, and their most recent discussion, why sex offenders are running for office. And so, you know, choosing a news event, a news report, and then engaging with it, talking about it, providing a frame of which to understand and to think about it. And here again, gender and the meaning of prison. And again, providing some critique, a way, you know, promoting critical thinking about the system, about representations. And this really, you can see this way of this easily accessible platform to engage in critical thinking about crime in the criminal justice system. And through this, one comment they say is, I think we've done our part for public criminology and bringing attention to issues surrounding prisons and juvenile correctional facilities and their impacts on both those inside the walls and on the larger community. In a further example, a different kind of way, and I love the title, is Criminology for the Masses. And so here another example of that doing of public criminology is that Wilfrid Laurier Bramford, and it's a colloquium series, bringing in criminologists from across Canada or internationally to their campus and having open lectures for the public to engage with the research that is being conducted. And the spokesperson said, each guest has been asked to speak about his or her chosen topic in a manner that is accessible to both students and the public, avoiding some of the jargon that can dominate in academic discourse. So providing that, again, easily accessible, but in a more traditional format, right, in terms of lectures. And then we come to kind of thinking about that other side. So you've got that side of public criminology, engaging with the public, prompting that way of learning and deconstructing. And then, of course, we've started to see that push and discussion thinking about within the university itself. And so further, the idea of operationalizing public criminology can happen in the classroom. And as Hamilton argues, there's now a push to reimagine the teaching of criminology and to think about various ways that digital media can help to create a more engaged and outward-looking criminology. And so integral to this public criminology is the dissemination of accumulated knowledge to those who are interested in studying it, for example, undergraduate students. That today, more than ever, criminology courses are high in demand among students. And so it's important to consider the challenges and possible strategies for teaching criminology to an audience that's continually bombarded by these images, by this false and misleading information regarding crime and punishment. And thinking about their exposure, daily to the myths, stereotypes, and conservative political rationality that permeate the media. And so really focusing on providing students with the tools to unpack that within that academic setting. So it's really got me to think about, what ways can I alter my pedagogical practice and reorient my teaching to fit with the goals of public criminology. To think of that art of education, how can I promote skills acquisition to develop strategies for the students themselves to become public criminologists. And so this leads me to talk about the course that I taught in winter 2014. And so the course, titled Crime and Media, so very fitting. Really, I've taught it before, but it was the first time here at TRU, and the first time that I really framed it from a public criminology perspective. That, from that first day in class, I wanted the students to think about that this was the goal, that I wanted to promote the idea that they themselves are public criminologists and can acquire these skills and also extend those skills into their life beyond that classroom setting. And so, putting forward right away questions that got them to think, can we as criminologists play a role in educating people about crime in the criminal justice system? Can the mass media themselves change to give the public a better understanding of crime and justice issues? And so I wanted to just quickly show, because then we can talk about this. I didn't get this up, but to show you the outline, to think about how it's focused on those ideas of deconstruction, and to think in terms of educational objectives, the idea of really promoting in the student the ability to evaluate and critically evaluate mass media offerings in terms of how crime in the criminal justice system are depicted. And go to kind of looking at how the course is structured, seeing that right away, why study the media and why we want to think about public criminology, using the Bits in an article to give them a framework, right away promoting that, and then kind of going through deconstructing, unpacking representations of police, courts, and corrections, and giving them examples, right? Integrating the use of digital media to show them examples, show them those images that they are, surrounded with every day, and give them those tools to be able to say, okay, well, I watch CSI or watch Criminal Minds on a daily basis, but haven't stopped to contemplate what are the implications of those representations. And then here you can see in terms of going to thinking about criminal justice policy, the 21st century, and in terms of where to from here. And their media assignment was an actual project of media deconstruction. And so, and there are some students here who were there, so you can ask them what they think. But so their project was to look at Orange is the New Black. Right? And so at the time that was really a popular, it was in the public imagination, everyone was watching the show. And their job was to read the memoir, right? So to read the memoir on which the TV show is based on and engage with that, and to think about how this text is constructed and how it's represented in the visual. And so really promoting that, again, skills acquisition to do that and to think about that, and to, especially in terms of the idea of a memoir, the voices of the person who it is their reality. And as well, the idea of women in prison and representations of women in prison has been a really important topic for media deconstruction because of what is often relied upon in terms of the more sensational, the more sexualized images of the incarcerated woman. And then further, another strategy that in terms of framing the everyday class every week was to start each class with a conversation about current events. And so to get the students each week to bring items, to bring things that they've seen in that week, items that whether they're larger events or ones that just have relevance to our conversations, and to bring them to class and have open discussion, an open kind of process of deconstruction. What do these events mean? How can we think about the representations of them? Looking at the images, the headlines, and so again, it comes back to that, providing the tools to think about that bombardment of images, right? To contemplate, not just it's that engaged learner. Right, to really help them to experience this in the everyday, and to then take those skills to, that it extends past the borders of the classroom, right? And so, for example, I just wanted to show you one that we did look at. Social media and Alaska's armchair sleuths. Impact Valley crime. And so here's just a great example to think about, and we're thinking nationally, internationally, globally, what's going on, right? And here's just a smaller story about, that hasn't got as much public attention. However, it's really interesting to think about it in the context of this discussion, the context of public scholarship, right? And so the idea of social media, how it's being used by citizens themselves to combat crime. And so they themselves are taking on the role of capturing criminals. And the police in the article are saying how this is great. It's an extension to help them combat thieves and burglars in what they're talking about. It says, there is no doubt in my mind that the site is useful for the people in the valley to keep their eyes open for stolen stuff. I can't think of a better way. But let's think about that, right? What are the implications of that? What are the consequences of that extension of control? And think beyond just what it's telling us, but what are the implications for changing the shape of the criminal justice system in this way, promoting that active citizenship, but what comes along? What are some of the things that come along with that too? And so this is what we would do, and then through the course of the lecture, I was enabled then to make reference to these ideas and make the content relevant, make theoretical concepts relevant to the students, to the everyday. And then there was a group project. And so this, for me, was kind of that pinnacle of the learning. That, in order to then be able to evaluate how successful this, kind of practice has been, is that the students themselves were asked to apply that knowledge and think about themselves as public criminologists and what they would do in order to bridge the gap between the university and the public, right? So bridging academic and public discourse. And so they were asked in the final class to present their ideas about a media strategy and to think about what would be a good method to disseminate criminology and criminological research to the public in order to help individuals evaluate and reframe cultural images of crime, criminals, and justice. Right? So that which they've been doing the whole semester, and so how can they think about that? How can they think about using digital media to promote that? And so I have examples. And so I wanted to share some examples with you. And this is one of the images one of the students used in their presentation. But I think just to quickly show you these, and then we can promote our discussion. And so go to Mike and Jocelyn, two of the members of this group who are here. And so here's in terms of their the presentation. And I'll go to just quickly showing you kind of, through the presentation, the students demonstrating the understanding of public criminology and also demonstrating that through the application, through their operationalization of it. And so, thinking about more suitable policies, better education to promote more confidence in the criminal justice system, and thinking about the landscape in terms of the open access journals, how can we create better dissemination of knowledge, and then their idea being the use of Twitter, and you can talk about it when in discussion. But the idea of what type of form of digital media could best kind of bridge that gap. The idea of this short and easy to understand forum, easily accessible, wide demographic, and so to use this to circulate pieces of criminological research, circulate knowledge. And they had a great contest for the students to engage in, for them to think about what would be a great tweet. Based on the knowledge that they've learned over the semester, what are some suggestions that could be used? And that was fun. And so just showing that, right? Showing the process of these students becoming these engaged learning, that academics will need to communicate in an appropriate, relevant, and interesting manner. Tell good, if complex and subversive stories which make sense to and can be understood by the different publics they may be addressing. And then another example from another 5 students in the class, Ryan Dawson, Krista Dawson, Jessica Gagnon. They thought about how an app could be used. And it's interesting to look at how apps are now being utilized in relation to one of the most recent apps called CopWatch, which enables people to videotape police misconduct. Right? So it's very interesting to think about the use of apps and how that can be used within this context. And so they created the idea of an app called Crime to Go. So circulating new daily news stories, breaking barriers between mainstream media and the criminology world, place to share sources, learn, create, and better experience the world of criminology. And allowing for constructive criticism, a safe place to comment and learn. And then finally, a student, Stephanie Namakat and Kimberly Fells and Dan Cavani used a blog. And so they put together, that idea of using an easily accessible forum, the idea of creating this blog of, similar to that society pages of Ungen and It to Bitson, that, talking about theories, talking about the criminological perspective, and engaging in a media analysis. And so they created this content for it. Right? So we've got 3 really great examples of the use there. And just show you the media analysis, the rap on rap, fame for felony. And through this, they're using the academic content that they learned and applying it, right? Doing their own analysis, a project of public criminology. And so that's kind of where there's so much I wanted to tell you, but I think that gives us a kind of an overview. And where I wanted to end too is just to to think about the challenges and the implications. Once you're thinking about the idea of trying to bridge the gap, what does that mean? And there have been criticisms, right? There have been people who've said, the implications of this are that you change the academic or professional nature of the discipline. Nick Groombridge, wonderful title, the idea of public criminology or media tarts. And he includes a quote by Tittle that says, if my correct interpretation of the meaning of public sociology is correct, then the program encouraging sociologists to become more public would appear to be a mistake. In my opinion, public sociology involves some false assumptions, endangers what little legitimacy sociology has, thereby helping to undermine the chances of sociological knowledge ever being taken seriously in previous arenas, and is in fact incompatible with good professional sociology. So a very strong statement there, right, about thinking about that, and it causes you to contemplate that. Even when I do current events, I think, am I spending too much time on this? Too much time on talking about the popular and not enough time on the academic discourse? But are the implications of that discussion greater because you're engaging and that knowledge extends, right? That the student comes away having learned more. And so think about those ideas, and I hope it's been interesting to share. Thank you. And sorry, I did go a bit over.
No, we still have 10 minutes or so for discussion. Who would like to start that?
Can I get you to stand up about where you are, and I want to be able to use that slide as a background, so when you answer your questions, feel free to...
Hey!
There you go, thanks.
So any thoughts, any responses on kind of that process of public scholarship, or how you yourselves are incorporating that into your own teaching, learning?
This might just be an invitation to bounce into the students who referred to, but how did the students tend to respond to this?
Sure. I guess I'll start. I really enjoyed that class in particular. I think it teaches you something that's difficult to learn from a book in a lot of other situations. And I think what we really got out of it was almost a sense of purpose, I want to say, because a lot of times, when you tell someone you're a sociology major, they don't know what that means. And I think it's important, to at least be able to say something about your sort of profession and your background of expertise. I'm an undergrad, but I think the best part of this class was definitely the engagement, and I think in a lot of other of Camilla's classes we do current events. And I think it's perfect because it really ties in. We can tie in theory with it. We can tie in so many things with current events. And I know a lot of other profs do it too. But I think ultimately that is probably one of the best teaching tools. I know it personally from my own experience. Just because, you can see that real world application, and you can see how, for example, how the crime control model and more conservative viewpoints are sort of disseminated and really kind of perpetuate in a certain demographic of people, and how can we try to change those things. And it just provides a really good background and enhances sort of your own understanding of theory. If that makes sense.
Thanks, Justin. And I think that's lovely to hear that, the idea of sense of purpose. I think that's definitely in terms of the idea of extending beyond the classroom, right? And to use that knowledge. Thanks for sharing that, Justin.
Can you say more maybe to students about how you teach them to deconstruct some of these media examples?
Yeah, so in terms of say those news articles, it's really to do that preliminary reading, but then to look at the images that are selected, to look at the choice of wording in the headlines, to look at, it's different now. Before I would have said to look at the placement in the newspaper, but now in terms of thinking about the forum that it's placed on. And then within the text, contemplating how it's talked about, what's included, what's missing, what kind of understanding does it give us about the offense or crime that's being talked about? Is there any context given? Right? So just focusing on those different aspects to go beyond just an initial reading.
Right. And experimentation, like if other media was used, like a different image or a different headline.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, and so we've had, in terms of looking at whether it was brought up in another forum or not. Yes, and not just the written. Like we would often watch clips and other kinds of things too, and entertainment as well. So the news and the entertainment spheres, and looking at how it's covered in various settings. Yeah.
Well, Camilla, your presentation seems to be extremely apropos because given what's happened on Parliament Hill, we have rival discourses. Security services want more police and want more police powers to invade privacy, whereas we see that this was a troubled person, a crack addict, who the system failed to give a healthcare response to. So the other side of it is that we need better healthcare services for our many addicts who are not getting healthcare. So we have rival discourse here, however, but we see where the power lies because we see what side the Prime Minister's on very clearly, especially having been scared in his closet. Fortunately, it was a very tragic situation, especially for the soldier that got killed. But it is being used to frame a debate so that security is the issue rather than healthcare for this completely disturbed person who became a terrorist. So your question then is, or the question raised by Groombridge, is public criminology appropriate, is very apropos.
Wonderful, thanks, Derek. And in class yesterday, we just had exactly that discussion about because of course the tragic nature of it, right? The loss of life there, but also allowing space to look at how it's being talked about and the implications for criminal justice policy, right? In terms of securitization and, as you said, the competing discourses, and so thinking about the implications of those media representations because the public wants to understand it, right? And so it has power. Those representations have power for structuring what is supported, and so that's exactly how we talked about it yesterday, right, in class, that it's really relevant, isn't it, to think about that, to think about rival discourses, how we are to understand it, and consequences of that. Yeah. Thanks, Derek.
Gary.
Oh, sorry, Gary.
For the students, I was just wondering if your groups or any of the other student groups contacted anybody in town in the criminal justice system for any kind of comments or opinions about public criminology, just to kind of add to the information that
our group didn't specifically, because we found it difficulty to engage with the public as far as like ethics go, right? Because this is kind of a university project. It is part of our research, so we couldn't really go about engaging with the public too much. It was kind of just like, how would we go about doing this?
It was more hypothetical in nature because,
Right.
Although you operationalized it as far as you could in terms of putting it up or do.
Yeah.
But I had said to them, and this is something, thanks for bringing that up, because that's something that we talked about at the start of the class, as Mike said, is ethics, right? And so how far can they operationalize this in the time constraints? And also in terms of the need for approval to go beyond just, engaging with digital media, because that would be a great way of also, extending it. And so to think about how we can include that later, another time. Yeah, thanks, Mike.
I'll ask you to join me in thanking Camilla again for a very thought-provoking talk.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming, and let me know if you ever want to talk about this at another time. I'd love to.
And if we would have time to fill in the short response survey, that would be great. Please, it looks like the coffee hasn't even been opened. Please grab some coffee. And there are very delicious 2-bit brownies there, 2-bite brownies, I should say.
Yeah, and are you okay? So I have all my notes and stuff.
Thank you.